So we're here on the Cornell campus. I'm talking to Lars Backstrom, who's a director of engineering at Facebook, and where he manages newsfeed ranking and infrastructure. And it seemed like there's sort of a lot of ideas, a lot of network ideas that go into newsfeed, so it just seemed like a nice chance to have a conversation about it. I mean, I guess when people see newsfeed, they see like the stuff on their screen and it's like updates from their friends, but I guess the point is like, it's actually interfacing you with the whole network in some
sense. Yeah, so I mean, if you think about the kinds of things that go into newsfeed, it's really trying to connect you to all your social graph, all the friends that you're connected to, all of the pages that you've fanned over your life at Facebook, and then build you this sort of personalized newspaper, right? I mean, we say that we're generating 1 billion personalized newspapers a day. We sort of see, our vision is take the sort of social network and all of the things that are coming from your immediate sort of network neighborhood, and out of all of those, find the ones that are most interesting to you, and build you that sort of like personalized experience where the most interesting things are at the top, right? You have this sort of notion of the news above the fold is what people see. That's the most important thing. And while that metaphor kind of comes from print, it applies just as much to newsfeed. And so our goal, very much like a newspaper editor, is to take the best things, put them at the top where people are going to see them.
And I guess like if you showed all of it, that would just be overwhelming. So you have to pick.
Right. I mean, if you kind of look at the history of newsfeed in the early days, there weren't nearly as many people, and there wasn't nearly as much content. I think the early days of Facebook, when newsfeed first originated, it was mostly just events and groups, and there just weren't that many people. They weren't producing that much content. And in that case, you could actually show everybody everything, and people would come, once a day, once every few days, and they'd be able to just catch up on everything that their, 50 or 100 friends have done. But as the site's evolved over the last, 6 years, the rate at which people share, everything about their lives on Facebook has grown. The number of friends that people have has grown. People have also connected to more and more pages. And so it's gotten to the point where the average person has like 1,500 stories a day that they could potentially see, which even for the most active Facebook user is far more than you would ever sort of possibly want to read. And this is a trend that we see continuing. People are sharing more and more. You're connecting to more people, more pages. And as that sort of growth continues, it just becomes more and more important that we do a good job of taking all of those things and finding the best ones, the ones that are most interesting to each of our sort of individual users, and only showing you those really important things. Your friend had a baby, or your best friend posted a status update, or the page that you are a huge fan of, the Orioles or whatever your favorite sports team was, posted about it. Yeah. Whatever it is that you're interested in, make sure that that shows up.
Right. So it's interesting because like we've talked about strong and weak ties. You say like your close friend had a baby, or a distant, like you can imagine that like for a close friend, I'm interested in like, a photo from a picnic they went to, but if it's like a weak tie, or it's like someone I don't see very often, every little event they go to I don't want to hear about, but if they had a life event, like they got engaged, they had a baby,
right,
I'd want to hear about that.
Absolutely,
so it's sort of like different links for doing different things, right?
Yeah, and actually, if you, talking a little bit about the history of newsfeed ranking, the very kind of early days when we were sort of just starting to try and pick out the best things, it was just getting to the point where there was too much content for people to consume everything. And the first step in this direction was, let's try and assign sort of a weight to every one of your friends. Figure out who's the close friend, who's the sort of distant acquaintance, who's the person that you were friends in elementary school but you haven't seen for 10 years. And so that was a good sort of first step, right? We were showing you the things from your close friends, not so much from your more distant friends. Over the sort of last few years, as we've gotten more sophisticated, we've realized that there's many different dimensions of friendship. And you might have the sort of crazy aunt who, when she posts her family photos, like you have to see them, you're socially obligated to like them, whatever. But when she posts the sort of links to abominable snowmen and Yetis and UFOs, you don't really need to see those. That's not really your cup of tea. Whereas you might have some distant acquaintance who, you could care less about their personal lives. You haven't actually interacted with them in a social setting for years, but they post really insightful thoughts or really great links, and they provide you with a lot of sort of important content. And so a lot of what we do is try to understand all these nuances, all the subtleties of your relationships to your friends and also to the pages that you're connected to.
Right, it's cool. So it's not just like, so it's like strength. Strength is like, I really know them, I see them a lot, or I don't, is one dimension, but then it's like, this person has great taste. Like this person who I don't know very well is great at selecting like educational videos, and I can like, share them with people and stuff, and that Right. So it's like many dimensions of this stuff going on, right?
Yeah, and I think
is there a sense of like how many? So strength is like one dimension. Like how many dimensions are there here? Like zillions, or there's like a few fundamentals. It's
a good question. I think there's not zillions. You can think. As we kind of aspire to capture as many of them as possible, and the point that we're at right now, I think we have sort of captured the like social friend versus like interest friend versus some mix of the two, and you can imagine that those things will just become more and more sort of subtle and nuanced. So right now, I think where we're at is we can recognize that you like this person's photos and you like this person's links, and the next step of sort of where we're hoping to go is you like this person's political links and you like this other person's technology links, right? And so there, I think, are a lot of dimensions, probably not zillions, but you can kind of enumerate, I think, rough, you have your sports friends and you have your technology friends and you have your politics and you have friends that like the same TV shows or the same movies. And so there's lots of dimensions, but it's, on the order of tens or hundreds.
And I guess it was nice. I mean, I like the description of like, this is a newspaper personalized to you, because you sort of often forget that like you're the only person where this is the news, what newsfeed looks like, right? Because it's like, if you think about this is your interface with the network, and you've got, you have, you have these coworkers, you have these family members, you have these friends, and you're the only person who's at the juncture of all those things, and that's somehow reflected in your newsfeed, right? So you sort of belong to these different communities, and you're the sort of unique crossroads of all those.
Yeah, and that's actually one of the big challenges that I think we face in the work that we're doing is we're trying to do all this machine learning and trying to figure out what's good and what isn't. But it's very difficult for anybody to sort of objectively say, like, this is good, this is bad, because it's so personalized. If I were to go and look at your newsfeed and have to judge it, I would really have no idea whether or not it was good for you, right? Like, maybe you play a lot of games and your feed is full of stories about the games that you play, and that could be really good for you. And I don't play a lot of games. I would think that was a complete disaster. But the fact that there is no sort of objective truth, it's all like very subjective and very personalized, makes it a very different sort of ranking problem from the types of things that Google would do, for instance. If you look at sort of search on a sort of web scale and you query for, I don't know, online courses, right? Most people could sort of roughly agree on the quality of the results. If it had like results that were relevant, people will say, oh yeah, that's an online course, that's relevant. If it had something totally irrelevant, everybody can kind of agree and say like, this is good, this is bad. Whereas on Facebook, it's the same scale of a problem, right? We're having to sort of do just as much computation, and like the machine learning is sort of just as much data, but it has this personal aspect which makes it much more difficult to kind of objectively quantify how good a job we're doing.
Right.
You can't sort of take your newsfeed and show it to 100 people and say, how good is this?
Right. That's interesting. Because so we're one of the topics we definitely talk about in the course is this idea of ranking web pages and so here we're ranking something quite different because it's personal to you. On the other hand, I guess it's not a hopeless problem, because you have, like, at first you'd be like, well, it's subjective, we give up. But I guess you do have features. You have information because you know what I've tended to click on.
That's right.
And I guess you even know what like close friends of mine have tended to click on, which maybe carries over to me. But yeah, so it's like you can still synthesize all that messy subjective stuff and try to build a model out of it or something.
Right. And so whereas I think in search, you have this sort of gold standard data where you say, like, is this relevant? And you can ask a bunch of judges. We have to use the more sort of implicit signals of what are people clicking on, what are people liking. And if we're doing a good job, if we're showing you things that are relevant, then you'll click on more and you'll like more and you'll comment on more things. And so we can still evaluate our success. It's just a slightly different problem.
Right. That's interesting. And so, so it's also like we've thought about these sort of, you're at the boundary of two communities, and so you sort of, like, one term we use is, you span a structural hole in the network, because, you are the only person who is like, works at this company and is an alum of this high school, right? And that somehow gives you opportunities to synthesize stuff. Like, maybe your high school reunion is looking, stuff came up that they want to make contact with this company, and people at this company, right? And is there a notion that this is giving you opportunities to creatively combine stuff that couldn't be combined otherwise, right? Because it's like you're seeing stuff coming in, no one else is seeing that mix of things.
So that's not something that I've looked at that much, but you can certainly imagine that those people who are at that sort of intersection do act as sort of conduits for some information flow, right? a certain amount of the content on Facebook is people sort of resharing content from one group to another, and you'll see things in your newsfeed where somebody shared something from somebody else, and so I think those people do act as sort of the information conduit between those two groups.
Yeah, right, and that gets into the whole notion that, in some sense, and there's another thing we think about is sort of contagion, right? Diseases are contagious, but also content is contagious, and stories are contagious, and it gets shared, and so you can actually get these kind of cascades that develop.
Yeah, and you can see that a lot in the data, and it's interesting that, to a certain extent, the work that we do on feed ranking actually goes to reinforce these contagions, because something that is good, that is getting a lot of likes or getting a lot of shares or whatever it is, getting a lot of clicks, we have all of those signals that tell us this is a really interesting piece of content. And then that kind of reinforces the fact that we're going to show it more and more in people's news feeds, which kind of helps those contagions to actually really take off. And if there is something that is particularly interesting or particularly relevant or timely, newsfeed ranking can actually kind of reinforce the spreading of that by putting it above the fold.
Right. And then I guess there's a question of the implications of this, right? So when I guess when we grew up, went to high school, there was no Facebook. The web was at some earlier stage of development. Now people grow up and they grow up, they go to high school, they go to college, they have Facebook. It's sort of building itself on these strong and weak ties that exist in our offline worlds, but then it's taking them and creating this thing that we interact with. So it's also kind of changing our social experience. It's not just sort of building on it, but then change. What do you think the implications? How is
it's hard to
everyday
really
life
compare
different? Because
I think we sort of know what things are like on Facebook with all the data that we have. We don't know what they were like before that or out in the real world. But I think it's reasonable to speculate that Facebook clearly helps people stay connected with their friends who live far away, and I think you see this anecdotally over and over again that people have their high school alumni groups or those kinds of things, which it used to be you would go to high school and you would maybe stay in touch with one or two of those people and you would see them every 10 years, but other than that you weren't having long correspondences with them. And I think one of the things that Facebook does is help people to stay more connected to those sort of weaker ties, to the people that they went to high school with. And in particular, by doing a good job at the ranking, we can show you all the kind of day-to-day things from your close friends, and maybe you're not as interested in every single thing that your sort of long-lost high school friend does, but when they have some huge life event, when something really important happens, if we can find that and make sure that you see those important events, that even though this person is no longer your close friend, it's still relevant to you that they got married or had a baby. Or
yeah, it's sort of a nice picture there. There's concentric circles of weaker and weaker ties going out. And I feel when I graduated from high school, a lot of people who I would have liked to stay in touch with, there was just no real way, and so those weak ties just essentially, they were so weak that they went silent. And now it's when there's a sufficiently loud noise way out in one of those concentric circles, you still hear it because it's somehow, you've maintained that, right?
Right.
And that's something the internet, I guess, can do, right? So.
Yep, yeah. And I think, it's only really made possible by the fact that you have these algorithms that are able to filter it and only show you the relevant things, right? I think if it were the case that you had to see everything from all these people, you would want to prune those weak ties, right? It would just be too much. And so the fact that we're able to go and say this is a weak tie, we're going to only show you the really important things, is I think very important for you in order to maintain that connection without having to see the less relevant parts.
Right. So should we pause here?